Hello and welcome to the next video in my series about the Dark-Eye core rules. We're going to talk about melee combat in more detail, and the section we're talking about is labeled special melee combat rules or something. It starts with the list of combat skills. A combat skill is attached to a kind of weapon. For example, there is a combat skill for daggers or swords or pole arms or such. And every character has every combat skills, can use any weapon, and the base value in a combat skill is 6, and can, for a newly created character of experience level, the normal starting level for character, you can have a combat skill of up to 12 in a weapon. And what it does is basically it tells you what your attack is. If you have a combat skill of 12, then you would also add a small modifier like 1, 2, or 3 based on an attribute, and this basically tells you what your attack is. And your defense is based on half of your skill plus an attribute modifier, and that is your defense. This is how the combat skills work. And the first combat skill here listed is daggers. Then we have fencing weapons, a skill for axes and blunt weapons combined, then chain weapons, lances for mounted combat for knights or something, a brawling talent for unarmed combat, a combat skill for shields, and just to clarify that, it works exactly like the other combat skills. So your value in shields is not your defense with the shield, it is your attack with the shield. And your defense with shields is half that, plus the modifier of the shield applied twice. You get a defense modifier for shields, and you would apply that twice to your shield defense value, which makes your defense quite high. So using shields can be very effective. Next is swords, then pole arms, then skill for two-handed blunt weapons and two-handed axes in one skill, and there is a skill for two-handed swords. That are all the skills. And the next thing that is explained are the armor rules. Armor rules are very simple, especially compared to older editions of the Dark-Eye. You just have certain armor classes, and they are based on what kind of armor it is. For example, there are 6 or 7 of them, and the first one is you wearing really light cloth, like your everyday cloth, and it doesn't give you any armor value. Then you would have more heavy cloth, for example, like winter cloth or something that is really thick but is not really an armor. It gives you an armor value of 1. And then you have a real armor that is supposed to protect you from attacks, but it is still something made from something soft, and for example like a cloth armor, and it would give you a defense value of 2, and it would also give you a level in the condition encumbrance, which means you get encumbrance level 1, and it means your attack and your defense and other values are reduced by 1. And then the next kind of armor is leather armor, and leather armor gives you an armor value of 3, and it also gives you an encumbrance level of 1, plus it reduces your speed and your initiative by additional 1. That is what is written back here. I forgot to mention this for the heavy cloth. It has also -1 on speed and -1 on initiative. And after the leather armor, you have chain armor with an armor value of 4 and an encumbrance level of 2. So you this would reduce your values by 2. And then you have scale armor with an armor value of 5 and an encumbrance of 2, and an additional modifier on speed and initiative of 1, -1. And the heaviest armor you can have is a plate armor with an armor value of 6 and an encumbrance level of 3. So this is very simple armor system, because in former editions of the Dark Eye you would have very specific different armors. For example, you would not only have a chain armor based on that you're wearing a lot of chain or your main body parts are protected by chains. No, you would have a short chainmail shirt or a long chainmail shirt, and you would have special armor for your legs and for your arms and different helms, and you could combine them in a different ways. So you could have a leather armor on your body and a helmet that is made of metal, and you would have cloth armor for your arms or something, and it would add together to armor value. They've simplified this now. I don't know if it's going to be more complex in rules that are going to be released in the future in additional material. I'm not quite sure, but this is for the Dark Eye traditionally a very simplified way of handling armor. Then the next section is about how do I get away? How do I run away in combat? You basically have to make a test on a physical combat skill, and if you succeed, you can run a certain distance away from your opponent. If you don't succeed in the test, you still run away, just not as far, and your opponent has the chance to make a free attack on you, the free -4 attack that automatically deals damage if you hit, the one you cannot dodge or parry. And the next section is exactly explaining this defense, this attack roll. It's a special attack roll that is used in different places, and I don't know how to translate it. It says something like it's a passing by attack you can make, because someone is just passing by, ignoring you basically because he's running away, or because you are in a situation where the other person you're attacking simply doesn't have a chance to defend, and you use this to make a quick attack with an attack -4, and you automatically deal damage if you hit because the opponent cannot dodge or defend. So then there is a rule for an ambush. Ambush is you make a talent test to see if you can spot the ambush. If not, you get the status of the condition of surprised, and it basically means you cannot act. Your opponent basically gets a free attack. It's not this attack, it's a normal attack he gets, which can be very dangerous because he can simply use maneuvers to deal more damage. And the only way to prevent this attack, and the surprise, is to use a fate point. If you use a fate point, you can avoid being surprised, and you would be allowed to defend against the ambush or against the first attack in the ambush. Next is explaining how to fight in when there's not a lot of room, and how it affects your attack and defense. It basically gives you a negative modifier based on the size of your weapon, based on the range. Then there is a description how you fight with 2 hands. I'm not going to cover everything in detail, but you can use 2 weapons to make 2 attacks in a combat round, but having 2 weapons reduces your attack and your parry value, especially the one for the hand you're usually not using. If you're right-handed and hold a weapon in your left hand, you will get a negative modifier because you're using 2 weapons at the same time to make 2 attacks in one turn. So it reduces for both hands the attack and defense value, and for your left hand you additionally get a modifier because you just can't use this hand that well. To avoid these negative modifiers, you have to learn both-handed combat skills. There is a special ability, not a skill, special ability you have to learn, and it has 2 levels, and you have to learn it, and that would completely avoid the negative modifier on both weapons for using 2 weapons in one turn for 2 attacks. But you would still get the modifier on your wrong hand, on your left hand. To avoid that, you would need special advantage during character creation. That simply says you're both-handed. You can, in theory, use both hands equally well. And yeah, that is, I think, basically it. You can then make 2 attacks against one opponent or against 2 opponents. One against 2 opponents each, and 2 attacks against one. You simply roll 2 attacks, deal damage twice. Each damage gets the armor value reduced, and the only change is when you make a critical miss. You roll the attacks one after another, and if you have a critical failure in your first attack, then you are not allowed to have the second attack. Else everything works the same. If your first attack, for example, and if your first attack succeeds and you roll a critical failure on a second attack, then you just have made one attack and the other was critical. So that's it, I think. Next one is if you're on higher ground or something, how that works. If you're in a position that is better than that of your opponent, and how you can get in such a position, what you have to do, for example, to get on a table and fight from there. Then a rule for attack from behind. It simply reduces the defense of your opponent. Then rules for limited sight. Limited sight is a condition. Here's the table that explains how it works. And based on how limited the size is, how little light there is, or how thick the fog is you're standing in, you get a modifier of -1, 2, or 3 on your attack and defense. And again, when it's level 4, you simply cannot see anything. Then combat in water. It also means when you're fighting in water or underwater, you get different modifiers applied to your combat values. This is how do I pick something up during combat. There is, for example, on the critical miss chart or the critical failure chart for attack or parry, there is an entry that says you lost your weapon, you drop your weapon. And this explains how you get it back. Basically, what you have to do is use an action to make a talent test on a physical talent, and that would allow you to pick up your weapon again. Then the size categories of opponents and how it modifies your attack value. It is basically, and what other rules are associated to it. I already explained something that you, for example, cannot defend, you cannot parry against a huge enemy. And the size categories here are tiny, small, mid-size, tall, and huge. And huge opponents, you cannot parry them because they're simply too big. You can only dodge. And for tiny opponents, you would get a modifier on your attack because they are so small. Your attack is lowered, and for tall enemies or big enemies, you would also be limited to defending against them with dodge or with a shield, blocking them with a shield. You cannot use a weapon to use your parry of the weapon. So next rule is about mounted combat, and I think let's cover it. This is basically the last of the melee combat, the last section about melee combat, and then it is about ranged combat. I'm not going to explain this in detail, and the first bullet points here explain certain what you have to do in combat and what special rules apply. For example, that you're considered in a better position when you're fighting someone on the ground and stuff like that. And these 3 bullet points are special maneuvers you can make and how you make them. It is a charge attack, a run over attack, and running away and stuff like that. Usually how it works, you have of course to roll riding talent tests for maneuvering your horse around and giving it certain commands, and else you fight pretty much the same with your attack and parade. I suppose you cannot dodge when you're sitting on the horse, at least not with your dodge value and stuff like that. So it's not very complicated and not very detailed. So that's it for the melee combat. If you have questions, then write in the comments. I try to answer. But that's it for the melee combat. Next will be about ranged combat. So bye.